She wasn't the maid imagine walking into a room where everyone looks at you, not with warmth or respect, but with an assumption that, because of the color of your skin, you must belong to a lower place, that you couldn't possibly be a guest, a professional, or a leader. For many people, this isn't imagination, it's reality. And this story is about one woman, a black woman, who walked into a wealthy dinner party and was immediately assumed to be the maid. What happened next shocked everyone in that room, and the lesson it carried stayed with them forever. It was a Saturday evening in Atlanta, and the Mitchell family was preparing to host one of their most lavish fundraising dinners yet. Their mansion, a sprawling white-columned estate with manicured lawns and a grand circular driveway, was buzzing with activity. Expensive cars lined the street, and valet attendants in neat uniforms jogged back and forth, carefully parking gleaming machines that cost more than most people's homes. Inside, waiters in crisp white shirts carried silver trays of champagne, weaving between clusters of wealthy guests who sipped their drinks and laughed politely, their voices bouncing off the high ceilings and crystal chandeliers. By 7:30, the grand foyer was filled with the sound of clinking glasses, designer heels tapping against marble floors, and the low hum of conversations about investments, travel, and influence. The Mitchells were known for their wealth, and their parties were more than social gatherings. They were displays of power, of status, of belonging to a world where money opened every door. At that exact time, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. The valet opened the door, and out stepped Angela Carter. She was 36 years old, with a calm, dignified presence. She wore a navy blue dress that was elegant but simple, her natural curls framing her face in a halo of quiet strength. She wasn't dripping in diamonds, nor carrying a flashy designer handbag, but there was something commanding in her posture, something in the way she moved that suggested she didn't need ornaments to prove her worth. She paused for a moment, taking in the grandeur of the mansion, before walking up the stone steps toward the entrance. Before Angela even reached the front door, a woman standing nearby leaned toward her friend and whispered, loud enough to carry, "Oh, finally the maid is here." The woman, dressed in a pearl necklace and a sparkling gown, sipped her champagne and smirked as if she had said something clever. Angela froze for half a second, the words landing like a sting, but then she straightened her shoulders and walked past without a response. She had dealt with moments like this before. She had learned to control her reaction. Though the burn of humiliation was always the same, inside the mansion, it didn't take long for more assumptions to follow. Angela moved through the crowded room, offering polite smiles, but the glances she received weren't friendly. A few guests frowned in confusion, whispering to each other. One woman tapped her arm and asked, "Excuse me, could you take my coat?" Another man, without even glancing at her, thrust an empty glass into her hand and said casually, "Get me a refill, will you?" Angela looked at the glass in her hand, her chest tightening. She placed it gently on a nearby table and said, her voice soft but firm, "I don't work here." The man blinked at her in surprise, his expression twisting into something between confusion and annoyance, before muttering under his breath, "Well, you sure look like the help." The words sank into Angela's heart like a weight, but she refused to let them show. She had learned to live with moments like this, but no matter how many times it happened, the pain never dulled. Each time was a reminder that the world could strip away her humanity with just one careless assumption. At the center of the room, Mr. Mitchell himself noticed Angela. He was a tall man with silver hair, a tailored suit, and a practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. He walked toward her, extending a hand, though the stiffness of his posture betrayed his discomfort. "Excuse me, miss," he said politely, though his tone carried an edge. "The staff entrance is at the back. Guests shouldn't be coming through here until after service." Angela tilted her head slightly, her eyes locked on his. "I'm not staff, Mr. Mitchell," she said, her voice calm but carrying a quiet steel. His brows furrowed. "Oh, I see. Well then, whose guest are you?" Before Angela could respond, the pearl-wearing woman from earlier cut in with a laugh. Clearly she wandered in by mistake. Or maybe she thought she could blend in. "Sweetheart, we'll let you get back to the kitchen now." Her voice dripped with condescension, and a few people nearby chuckled nervously. Angela's hands trembled slightly at her sides, though she kept her face composed. Her heart raced, her pride stung, and for a split second she thought about simply leaving. But then something in her mother's voice echoed in her mind. Her mother, who had worked as a cleaner for decades, who had faced countless indignities, who had always told her, "People will try to define you by their smallness. Never let their smallness shrink you." So instead of leaving, Angela made a decision that would change the entire tone of the night. She walked past Mr. Mitchell, past the pearl-wearing woman, and stepped onto the small stage at the front of the room. The stage where, in just a few minutes, the evening's keynote speaker was scheduled to stand. Conversations hushed. The laughter died down. Every eye turned toward her, confusion spreading like a wave. Angela adjusted the microphone, her heart pounding in her chest, but her voice, when she spoke, was steady. "Good evening," she began. "I've been mistaken for many things tonight. A maid, a server, someone who doesn't belong, but let me introduce myself properly. My name is Dr. Angela Carter." Gasps rippled through the room. Glasses froze mid-air. Someone audibly choked on their drink. Angela continued, her gaze sweeping across the crowd. "I'm the CEO of Carter Innovations, a technology company that employs over 300 people in this very city. I'm also the daughter of immigrants who worked as cleaners and laborers so that I could study, so that I could have opportunities they never had. And tonight I was invited here as your keynote speaker." The silence was deafening. Faces turned pale. The pearl-wearing woman's smug expression collapsed into horror. Mr. Mitchell's jaw clenched as if he were swallowing his pride with difficulty. The man who had handed her his glass shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her eyes. Angela took a deep breath and pressed on. "But before I begin my speech about innovation and opportunity, I want to address something else, something deeper. The assumptions made about me tonight. The way I was treated. The quiet acceptance of disrespect." Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. "This is racism. Not the loud kind that fills history books, not the burning crosses or shouted slurs. No, this is the quiet, poisonous kind. The kind that hides behind polite laughter and champagne glasses. The kind that decides someone's worth before they've even said a word." She looked directly at the man who had thrust his glass into her hand. He squirmed, his face flushing. "What you thought was a maid," she said firmly, "is a leader, a business owner, a woman who employs staff of her own. Staff I treat with respect because I know their worth. I'm not ashamed of service. What I am ashamed of is the arrogance that looks down on it." A ripple of unease moved through the crowd. Some people stared at the floor. Others shifted in their seats. The weight of guilt, of complicity, hung thick in the air. Angela's voice softened, but carried even more power. "Tonight is meant to raise money for opportunity. But opportunity means nothing if we cannot see the humanity in one another. If you look at me and see less than your wealth, your influence, your titles, they mean nothing." Her words struck like a hammer. No one dared to interrupt. Even the servers, who had been moving quietly through the room, stopped and listened, their eyes wide. For once, they were not invisible. By the time Angela transitioned into her actual keynote, the atmosphere in the room had shifted entirely. The polite arrogance had melted into shame and reflection. Mr. Mitchell personally approached her afterward, stumbling through an apology. "Dr. Carter, I misjudged. I hope you can forgive the misunderstanding." His face was pale, his voice shaky. The pearl-wearing woman avoided her completely, retreating into the corner of the room as if hiding from her own guilt. The man with the glass slipped out before dessert, unable to face her again. But more importantly, some guests who had stayed silent earlier now approached Angela with sincerity. They thanked her for her courage, for saying aloud what they had never had the bravery to confront. A few admitted their own guilt, confessing that they had thought similar things when she walked in. For the first time that evening, their words carried honesty instead of performance. Angela didn't smile in triumph. This wasn't about humiliating anyone. It was about revealing a truth. It was about standing tall in the face of prejudice and refusing to let anyone diminish her humanity. When she finally left the mansion that night, she thought of her mother again. Her mother's hands had been rough from years of scrubbing floors, her back bent from long shifts, but her spirit had been unbreakable. Angela knew she carried that spirit with her. She walked to her car with her head held high, the night air cool against her skin. The memory of her mother's words etched into her heart. Never let their smallness shrink you. Racism isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers in assumptions, in the way someone hands you a glass without looking, in the way they see your skin before they see your soul. But every assumption can be shattered, by truth, by dignity, by refusing to stay silent. The next time you feel the urge to judge someone by appearance, remember this story. She wasn't the maid, she was the leader, and the world is always watching which role you choose to play. The one who belittles or the one who respects.